evolving thinking and unlearning things. That's kind of been a new breakthrough for me. It's like, what has served me well and what has my family instilled in me that's brought me to where I am today, and what new learnings might I adopt moving forward for quality of life.
Welcome to the Break Free podcast. I am your host, David Mancella. As my faithful audience knows, we've been doing this is our third year of doing this podcast, and it's one of the most beautiful things I get to do every week as I interview brilliant minds that focus their life on being entrepreneurs and making this world a better place. And what a great example we have today. To those we have today, Daniel Linares. Brother, welcome to the show.
David, excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Daniel, for the audience, can you tell me where do you live and what's your business about?
Yeah, so I'm born and raised Queens, New York. Over the pandemic, we got a place in Sarasota, Florida. We run an events business that caters to wedding clients looking to do extraordinary things with entertainment, blending live DJ and live band for wedding productions. And during the pandemic, we had to pivot because the world kind of stopped live events, as everybody knows. And we said, where else is there a big need? And so kind of a new market that had this big need was helping New York City schools produce virtual graduations. And so that kept us very busy. And yeah, here we are today, continuing to serve both of those markets, continuing to innovate and continuing to add value where we can.
That's crazy how you pivoted so fast so you could survive. Tell me more about that, because you've been doing like on-site events for how long before the pandemic?
Yeah, about 15 years.
Oh my God, 15 years. And all of a sudden you had to change your strategy overnight. So what happened? Tell me, what was that psychological breakthrough?
Yeah, I mean, it's the world that we all knew. I say we, obviously I'm friendly with a lot of people in the industry at all kinds of levels. And so, when March 2020 came around, it was like, okay, short vacation, everybody's off, let's shut it down for a week. And then 2 became 4, et cetera. Then it's like, wait, what are we going to do? And my wife was also the added nudge. We weren't married at the time. Now we're married, but she was like, hey, all right, vacation time's over. What are we going to do? And because we come from the wedding world, it's like, wait, are there going to be an online weddings? Is that actually going to be a thing? And we kind of paid attention to it a little bit, but quickly realized, all right, I don't think that's going to be this massive need. People are going to put it off. Some people did Zoom weddings. Some people really invested in, let's do a really super socially distant, but it wasn't this big market that was activated. It was a substitute for maybe 5% of the people. Most of our clients pushed until they could really, really do the event in person. And so the breakthrough was, okay, where else is there a massive need? Mm-hmm. Massive need. Where else? And so at first we're like, wait, maybe we could help with schools with some entertainment. And we started to have conversations with people in education. They're like, oh my gosh, all these high school students and all these middle school students are supposed to graduate. And so we're thinking about parties, but then graduation is the other obvious one. Parties are like a luxury. Graduations are a mandatory thing for students that have been working hard for years to get to this point. And so we decided to just hustle and outreach and try to figure out who's the decision maker that we could speak to and say, look, we have a lot of production resources around us. How can we help you? They said, well, if we were to send you 20 or 30 graduations, we need virtual graduations produced. Can you help us? Now, big learning that I think back of what happened there. In that moment, we've never produced a virtual graduation. Let alone 1 or 5. When they said right. 20 or 30, could you handle it? I could have said no and lingered back into comfort zone, or embrace the unknown, figure it out, be resourceful. And that's what we did. We got an interview with the person leading technology for New York City schools. There's 1,800 schools in all of New York City, K or even pre-K to high school level. And we're like, okay, if we got 20 or 30 graduations, that would be freaking awesome, because we're not busy with live events. Let's figure out virtual events. And 2020, we did 65.
Wow.
2021, we did 104.
My God.
And now it's like morphing back into some in person. The virtual thing isn't even a big need anymore. So we're continuing to ask our customer. But the big learning in that, and I know your show is the Break Free podcast, is allowing new circumstances that are uncomfortable to challenge you to grow. And it's unlocked, honestly, the reason why you and I are probably talking right now, David, what is because we connected in a group that we may have not been in due to the slowness of the live events world, and we really needed to pivot. And the secret sauce, I believe, is you just have to be resourceful. You don't need to know everything, okay? Yeah. We're taught that we need to learn everything before taking that next step, or it needs to be pre-calculated, and you need to invest all the time. If we said, okay, let's give it a couple of years and figure out this virtual graduation thing on our time, it never would have worked. But being resourceful and figuring it out and seeking the masters. My friend Timothy Paulson says, you know, his dad became a world-class painter because he wanted to learn from the master. So how do you speed things up? You seek the masters. We found out, all right, how are we going to live stream this in the middle of the field? So as it started to become back in person, it was like, wait, now it's outdoors, now it's in a field, now there's no power or internet, but we need power and internet. How are we going to do this? And we just continued. Where's the masters? Who knows how to do this? Who could figure this out? So, you know, it's just a lot of mastering the silly self-talk that tries to keep us comfortable, and trusting in self that you could figure it out, or you have friends that can help you figure it out. It's
such a valuable lesson, Daniel. And that's why you're still here and just still an entrepreneur after 15 years, 17 years of doing this. You know, Break Free podcast is all about that. How do you find freedom in your life? And I always tell people, freedom begins in the other side of your comfort zone. Let me explain, because being comfortable is nice for a while, but if you get to used to go to your comfort zone, the more comfortable you are, the higher is going to be the fear when you try to do something else. And every single human being has this desire to achieve more. And I'm not talking about money, okay? It could be money, but it's about your own self. And fear is something that you need to manage, which eventually you can actually abolish altogether. I'm in this path in my life after working for so many years and so many things that has happened in my life, where I see fear as something that is evaporating from my life. But it doesn't happen overnight. At the beginning, you need courage. And what's courage? Courage is doing what you need to do despite the fear that you're feeling. So don't ignore the feeling, but also don't focus on the feeling. Grab that feeling and transmute it into energy so that you can achieve your goal. And that's where resourcefulness comes in. And what a beautiful case where you have to be forced to do it. For you was either I pivot and I innovate, or I die. Because your business was out of business, basically, because of the pandemic. You went from revenue to zero revenue. Right?
Yeah, and then to wedding clients talking about, okay, what does a refund look like at this point? Imagine that at scale. Like not at the scale of others, but we're more of a boutique company. We have about 50 to 70 weddings a year. And so imagine everybody saying, hey, so what does that look like? Hey, what does that look like? Hey, what does that look like? Imagine the overwhelm. And, we're not in the business of taking our clients' money, but we're also, need to protect our business. So, that of course was uncomfortable. I mean, what you just said right there, David, is the ding, 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 I believe, when people can figure out, which is being able to change your relationship with those feelings of fear, the relationship of those feelings of uncertainty, those feelings of, oh my gosh, I've never been here before. Let me try to ignore those feelings or what have you. So I heard Kobe Bryant, rest in peace to Kobe, but I heard him say something that I'm like, that's it. He said, I used to, when I was younger in playing basketball, I used to feel the feeling of anxiety and nervousness. And I tried to ignore it. I tried to pretend that it wasn't there. But when I shifted, I actually acknowledged the feeling and changed my relationship with what those feelings were. Now I'm starting to use a little bit of my words, but Kobe's essence was, instead of trying to ignore the feelings, I started to acknowledge the feelings, recognize that they're there, and treat it as, okay, this is what growth feels like. And I actually like to use the words of like the butterflies inside you, controlling those butterflies. And instead of thinking, oh my gosh, my body's trying to protect me, it's just, oh my gosh, my body's never been here before. And it's a little new, it's a little uncomfortable, but I'm going to grow and I'm going to embrace the uncertainty and move forward. I think that is the biggest distinction of high performers, people that can continue to break through these imaginary glass ceilings that we all put inside, around us, and breaking through the glass ceiling, breaking through the glass ceiling, breaking through the glass ceiling, because it's all imaginary. And so I believe if you can start to say, whoa, these really uncomfortable feelings, if I could get used to them somehow by practicing being uncomfortable over and over, like take an improv class, for example, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on stage. Just continuing to be uncomfortable is how the Kobe Bryants of the world are able to continue to rise. And it's a mindset of dealing and honing those fear muscles to leverage. And I think it's such a powerful shift in thinking.
It's true. Now, there is something that happened to me, though, that is funny because it's almost like a paradox. But life is full of paradoxes, right? When you get into this growth mode, you also have to acknowledge how far you've come, right? And Dan Sullivan wrote a beautiful book called the Gap and the Gain. Because especially if you start becoming courageous and you start achieving more, and you realize that you're not supposed to be in your comfort zone, and so that you don't indulge, you stay there for a little bit and you grow again and you keep growing. Now you do it on purpose. A lot of the times life makes you grow, like what happened to you, but also it's self-induced too, right? Like you want to grow. Now, why do I mention this? I was trapped in a loop, especially for the last 5 years, where it didn't matter how much I grew and it didn't matter how far I've gone. I always wanted more. And I put myself on unnecessary risk in order to achieve things that were meaningless. So, I'm a born-again Christian, so I go back to the Bible when I get in trouble. And 1 Timothy 6 says, godliness with contentment is of great gain. So it's contentment too, right? So it's being able to say, this is awesome. Like, look, all this stuff that I've been able to accomplish, right? But at the same time, never get stuck there. And that's where the paradox comes, right? You have to have that balance. Because what was happening to me is that I was wrecking my family for a meaningless pursuit of growth. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know.
I'm still growing, by the way, and I'm going exponentially. But now I'm doing it in a balanced way. I'm still never going to stay in my comfort zone. Like I was diagnosed with ADHD last year, and my psychoanalyst told me, you can never stop growing, you can never have a job, and you can never retire. Right?
Yeah.
That's
well, I was lucky,
condition, right?
I was lucky to meet Dr. Edward Hallowell, who's the who's the top expert on ADHD. And so I believe I'm undiagnosed. By the way, congratulations on your diagnosis. It's a
Thank you.
superpower when used the right way, folks.
The right way, yes.
When used the right way. I mean, it's like a little jetpack, but the jetpack could go in the wrong direction or in the right direction. And so, you know, the the huge thing that it sounds like you've been able to clarify is we think happiness is at the destination. This is like the biggest breakthrough I've ever had. I've having repeated it so many times, it feels like everybody should know this, but I think everybody experiences it in their own way. And that is essentially the chase of getting to where you want to go. Mm-hmm. Of I want to grow a company that reaches this level of revenue, or I want to have a house that is this size, or at this city, or this car with this fancy logo on it. We think happiness is when we get there. And that's why relentless pursuit of goals sometimes is almost destructive to yourself, to your relationships, to your body, because we tell ourselves, oh, when I get there, then I'll have made it. And I was there too, David. I was there, and I'm lucky to have discovered that probably 6-7 years ago. I know you and I share a passion for learning from a mentor of ours, Tony Robbins. And one of the biggest breakthroughs I had at you know, kind of during my personal development journey is finding the joy in the day-to-day. It's okay to be pursuing these big, hairy, audacious goals, or a moonshot goal, all these cool ways that people have thought of these big goals. And the fun part is that goal can change. I love to set out a 3-year goal, and then 3 months later, you're like, okay, slight shift. And then 3 months later, okay, slight shift. There's no permanent future, but the excitement and the forward momentum toward those goals is what makes everything exciting. But finding the joy in right now, in looking outside and appreciating a little bird that's just right there, or but buying a coffee for somebody that was a complete stranger that held the door for you. And you're like, wow, this is a nice person. I'm going to get them a cup of coffee. The beauty in the day-to-day, looking in the mirror, David, and telling yourself, love you, man. You've come a long way, and there's more to come, and life is beautiful, and the uncertainty of life. And so that's a huge thing that you shared. And those of you watching, if you're somebody that is, or listening, if you're somebody that is really focused on hustling to reach an income level or some sort of status, make sure you enjoy the now. It's okay to dream about the future and be excited about growth. But you really need to enjoy the now. That's how there's billionaires that are miserable. That's how there's people at any level of income that many people dream about that are miserable. Why? Because they think more is happiness. And once they get there, they're like, oh my gosh, what was I doing? I was entranced. My family was affected. My relationships were affected. My health was affected. And so this is like, I would say one of the happiness formulas that, like you said, the Gap in the Gain book has their own way of articulating that, where you just really need to appreciate all that you've gained up to now. Look at the last 10 years of your life. Like, where are you now? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I still, like I said, I still strongly believe that your future has to be better than your present. That doesn't mean, though, that you will sacrifice everything again to gain a future that is meaningless. Because at the end of the day, everything is meaningless, right? Talking about Tony Robbins, you know, I started doing a lot of research because I brought one of my brothers-in-law. I brought him to Tony Robbins, and he is very grown in faith. And so he went to a UPW with me. And after that, he says, I'm amazed. But everything he says is based on the Bible. I'm like, no, I don't believe you. And that was like 7 years ago, and I never looked back. Looking at so I don't go to Tony Robbins anymore. I stopped for about 3 years now. But I was doing some research, and I stumbled upon Zig Ziglar. You know who Zig Ziglar is?
Zig Ziglar. I've heard of Zig, and I know his principles are in a lot of the more recent thought leaders, but no, I don't know too much about it.
That was Tony's mentor. And Zig Ziglar brought the majority of his teachings from the Bible. And it's funny because when you listen to him, he actually makes mentions where he's taking the knowledge from. So I'm like, what? So now going back to the source, like in December, for example, I read the book of Ecclesiastes, and that's what I realized that everything is meaningless. And when I said everything is meaningless, is everything that you can acquire materially it renders itself meaningless. And that's where, and I'm just talking about that because of what you said, right? You become a billionaire, and how many billionaires are miserable or multimillionaires that are miserable? And it's because there is no material wealth that will fill that void in your heart, right? That's something different that you need to figure out how to fill up, right? So, and you get stuck in the loop. And also, another thing that I learned is that everything material has a payout. So it's not free, right? So for example, I love watches, right? I do love watches, right? And eventually I got 12 watches. You know what a pain in my back is to have to maintain those things? I'm starting to give them away because it has a burden, right? Everything material has a burden. You buy a beautiful house, right? 5,000 square feet. Now you got to maintain that house. And even if you pay for people to maintain it, you still have to manage, right? So it's going to cost you time and brain power. That doesn't mean not to have those things. It just means that you have to be aware that the more material possessions that you have, the more you need to manage, and that's going to require effort and time. So for you, let me ask you, what's the two most valuable resources for a human being?
What do you mean the two most valuable resources for a human? My mind goes in a couple
as a
directions.
person, what do you have? What's the two most valuable resources for you?
I would say connection is a big one. Like being able to connect, I believe, is a huge portion of happiness. We're talking about growth as a business, as entrepreneurs, but like connection, just authentic connections, people that you could just feel, right? Like the pandemic really took connection away from many of us, which is why there were so many things in the mental health direction where people struggled. Like for me, I would say connection is one of the first thing that comes to mind. Actually, people who have ADHD thrive on connection, thrive on collaboration.
Yeah, that's why I have this podcast. I didn't know, but now I know.
thrive. And so, hearing about, shout out to Ned Hollowell. He has a book called ADHD 2.0. And he just talks about how, people who are a little bit different, entrepreneurs that, I was somebody that I thought I was a stranger or a weirdo for not being able to read really any books from K through 12. I was like, all right, I'm just going to read the Cliff Notes. My attention can't stay locked in a book. Yeah. And now as an entrepreneur, I found a hack. The hack is buy the book, but buy the audiobook and stay locked in, listen to it while reading it at the same time. And, I wasn't wired in that way. So connection's probably the biggest one for me. It's like, I love to be around people. I'm an extrovert. I get, my cup gets filled up when I'm pouring into others, when I'm trying to help people. That's really my big one. I'm trying to think of a second one, but how about you? I'm curious.
So of course, connection, like you got it right on, but what do you need to have connections, to create connections? You need time, right? So for me, time goes a little bit before connections. Without connections, we're nothing, by the way. It's an incredible resource, but you need to use the resource of time to create a resource of connection and networking. And for me, the second one is health. If you are sick, man, nothing matters, right? They say that for a healthy person, you can have 1,000 problems. For a really sick person, you only have one problem.
Yeah.
And it's your health, right? So that's now that I feel like I'm getting more wisdom, the more I age, the more I focus on freedom of time and freedom of health on purpose. Because I know that if I take care of those two things, I will have the resources to gain anything else that I want in life, right?
That's great. Yeah, I was talking to my dad. He's visiting us in Sarasota, Florida, the last several days. My parents still live up in New York. And, sometimes what we learn is that's how we spend our time. And so my dad, He's a dentist. He comes from a very humble background. Was born in Colombia, Bogota, Colombia, when he was younger, and came to New York when he was like 7, 8 years old. And so, sort of he comes from a lot of struggle, a lot of figuring things out. His mother was, just trying to provide for her kids, and he's got this belief of like, I just need to do it myself. I just need to do it myself. And so, evolving thinking and unlearning things, that's kind of been a new breakthrough for me. It's like, what has served me well, and what has my family instilled in me that's brought me to where I am today, and what new learnings might I adopt moving forward for quality of life. And so one of them, a friend by the name of James Golden, he did this talk about like filtering everything you do in your life through 5 words. Does this bring me joy? Filtering everything through life. Does this bring me joy? I don't know about you, David, but I don't enjoy getting a car wash. I don't enjoy doing dry cleaning. I don't enjoy cleaning my house. I don't enjoy going to the supermarket to go pick out food. And I think there was one more on the list of 5. But essentially, if those 5 things don't bring you joy, let's say you do have a cleaning service that comes, cleans your house once a week, maybe twice a month. And what if you could have a conversation with this person that you're paying one fee for and say, hey, look, could you help us out with these other 4 things? Could you run to the grocery store every week or get us a car wash every week? I will pay you more for your time. They're likely going to appreciate it. Wow, I'm going to get more money from this client just for doing a couple additional hours. And the freedom of time starts to open up there. And you could spend it in areas that are most. And so I explained that concept to my dad. I'm like, Dad, look, you could be doing less of the stuff and have more time doing what you please. And
brilliant.
He's like, well, that's kind of cool, Dan. Right. So it's just, I don't know. I just have this genuine curiosity. I think it's like a ADHD thing where you just have this curiosity to want to learn how to optimize not only your business. Eventually it's like, wait, how do I optimize my time, my life, where I could spend it the way I want and get support around the other areas that don't bring me joy.
Yeah. You got it right on, brother. I mean, like, you have so much wisdom. You should be like 70 years old, man.
I feel like an old soul sometimes, and I think it's my constant curiosity. Like we both know Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach. He is, I believe, 78 years old. He's a few years from 80, and he shows up as a student all the time. Always curious about insights, different angles. Meanwhile, he's likely a lot of times one of the more intelligent people in the room, if not one of the great thinkers. But I think the constant curiosity of not being stubborn in the sense of, oh, I've figured it out. I'm already here. I don't need to learn anything else. Like I made it. I'm here. And I think people stay still if they don't allow for continued learnings throughout life.
And it's a matter of humbleness and pride, right? You get proud, brother, you stop growing. That's the end of your life. If you get pride, what happens with Dan is he's humble enough to be willing to learn from his students. And he's the wisest dude in the room. I mean, he's the oldest and the wisest, right? But he's still learning from us, right? He pokes my brain all the time regarding technology because I happen to be an expert in software and emerging technologies. So he acknowledges that this is not his area, and he's willing to get taught by somebody that is 30 years younger than him, right?
And there he is. He's being resourceful. See, Dan Sullivan doesn't know all the answers to everything in life, but he's built a very successful company. David doesn't know everything there is to know about everything to build, but he has an area of expertise, surrounds himself with a rock star team, and is resourceful moving forward. I think that's the biggest thing that freezes a lot of people, David, is people think they need to know the answer to everything. Otherwise, they're not worthy. They don't deserve it. Nobody in their family has ever achieved that level. And so it just keeps people comfortable. Resourcefulness, I think, is the biggest activator that everybody should keep top of mind when doing new things. Oh my goodness, what does that 3-year super goal look like? And then who do you know, or where could you surround yourself with others that might be able to help, i.e. events or masterminds, that can help you figure out the answers to those questions. If you could curiously figure out who are the right people to help you get to where you want to go, that's where levels start to get unlocked very, very quickly. And that's what Dan has done his whole life.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think he's been a business coach for like over 40 years. It's incredible, right? Daniel, how did you get into being an entrepreneur? Did you ever have a job? Like, why did you become an entrepreneur?
Why did I become an entrepreneur? I was always the class clown. Like, I didn't like to learn the way teachers wanted to teach. And I think for me, I wasn't wired for the way most public schools train or teach. If I didn't agree, or if it was just too boring, like I couldn't stay locked in. So I was a little bit of the class clown, but that was, I think, my ADHD saying, like, I'm not interested enough. This is boring. I need more stimulation. I need more connection, because what, I'm going to just sit in class for 51 minutes and not talk to anybody, like sometimes. And so for me, it was like, wait, the traditional means I went to performing arts school, Frank Sinatra School of the Arts. I have a singing background. I thought I was going to be the next Justin Timberlake. And then I got into college and learned about the music industry, learned about the technology behind producing music. So the recording studio world, I come from a very technical background. And I was working for Apple through the college years. And even Apple, I was like, wait, like, I want to fly. And I felt like somebody said, Dan, you were just a big fish in a small pond. You grew in the pond that they had, and you grew so big that it just wasn't a fit for you anymore. I wanted more. I wanted to fly. I wanted to do great things. And so I'm like, all right, maybe this is the opportunity. I actually got fired for giving an old man an education discount who wasn't a student, like something stupid like that. And in hindsight, it was a blessing, right? We sometimes, not sometimes, I would say there's no coincidences in life. I firmly believe that there's no coincidences. I don't believe it's a coincidence that you and I are talking right now. I believe I moved on from retail, and it said, all right, what are you going to do about it now? What are you going to do about it now? And it took me years to figure things out. I started building a business, started learning about marketing. What is this thing? My father became a dentist. My mother was there for us. She was a homemaker. So she raised my two siblings and I. So there's three of us. But for me, it was like, I knew my grandfather had about 30 different businesses, and two of them worked. One of them happened to be real estate, but he had a driving school, and he was just trying so many things. I think his ADHD was even more intense than mine. And
my dad had 7 businesses before he passed away too. Yeah.
How many?
7.
7. So I made up the number. My grandfather had a lot, but he passed in like 1999. So I was 12 years old or so at the time. So the concept of even what an entrepreneur meant, I knew nothing about. But for me, it was like, wait, I could control my future by bringing value to markets. And I just started as a DJ. I came from an on-stage background as a singer, as a DJ. And I'm like, wait, I could like turn this into a business and make pretty good money. And wait, it's growing, and I'm making money that doctors are making and lawyers are making. And I kept doing it. I'm like, wait, I'm making more money than like professionals. Like school said, the only way to become successful is become a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, or, a lot of kind of the corporate route, a little bit more traditional sense. And I'm like, I'm not wired for that. And for me, it was just this culmination of figuring out what excited me. And I mean, just the way everything's panned out for us to get to here today, it's beautiful. And embracing the uncertainty of life, but still having your goals set on where you want to go. That's the most important thing. For a while, I didn't understand that. For a while, I was coasting. There may be people watching or listening to this that might say, oh, okay, my business is doing okay, but I am kind of coasting. Mm-hmm. Are you thinking big enough on where you're heading? Just because you don't know the exact steps to get to this massive goal doesn't mean you shouldn't aim for it, because, it's easier to rethink an entire business model than to just incrementally try to do 10% better than last year, or hopefully we do 30% better than last year. How can we take a big leap forward? And for me, that's definitely been huge.
That's beautiful, man. Aside from the crisis during COVID, what has been one of the most difficult times in your business, and how do you went through it?
Difficulty in business. I would say it was just probably when I was in my 20s, right? I had this business that started out producing weddings, and I was like, all right, how does this become a legit business? I thought charging $70 an hour for a 4-hour event was like, whoa, this is $70 an hour. This is like a big deal. And so just like evolving and changing the way I'm thinking about things, I think it was just my whole journey getting up to figuring out actually how to increase value to the market and how to put the value in front of the right people. And so for me, I don't know if there was a super struggle time. I mean, the pandemic definitely was like within a few months, it was just like, what are we doing? But I would say just going from this creative music person into figuring out, all right, what is it that the top 1, 2, 3% are doing in our market? What are we doing? Success leaves clues, as Tony would say, but Zig Ziglar probably said that originally. But like success does leave clues. So you don't need to pursue your goals with only your imagination as your guide. You can use not only the people around you, but model success of other people that have risen in their industry where you could potentially do something similar. So I believe modeling and learning through other people's stories is a great way to build up confidence for you to continue forward. We're in 2023, and I guarantee you what you're trying to figure out has probably been figured out many times over. Before. And so it feels like you're alone as an entrepreneur, but when you can start to realize like there's a lot of people that have also felt like they're alone. And there's a lot of people that have still ascended, that have still built up the confidence to take momentum at these big goals. And then you figure things out along the way. I mean, Ready, Fire, Aim. That couldn't be a better title to a book, where you're ready, you're going to fire, and you're going to aim along the way unapologetically. If there's turbulence along the way, you're going to keep going. And managing state and managing our mindset and being able to, like what you said earlier, where nothing matters, or what phrase did you use, David? Was it nothing really matters? Everything is meaningless.
Or you can call it vanity, right? Everything is vain.
Yeah, like I also, my spin on that is you're just living in a body, in a character that you believe has all of these rules that are all made up rules. And you could literally just show up and say, I'm not going to be that person anymore. It's hard to understand that, but for you to say, okay, you've believed that you're shy, you believe that you're introverted, you've believed that, because you come from this background, there's no opportunities for you, or because family has only brought, gotten to a certain point, you can't ascend beyond that. These are just beliefs that are all imaginary, but we believe them because it's all we know. And I think when you can have that distinction of, like, I literally believe I'm an avatar, like the Daniel Linares that was yesterday doesn't need to be the Daniel Linares of today. And that right there takes a little bit of really understanding self, testing out emotions, and definitely a little bit of soul searching if you haven't done personal development. But when you can realize that everything that you believe about yourself is all your imagination, and how you could fly to really any level you want. I mean, back to the shy and introverted thing. I believe, David, that if you're shy and introverted, you could be extroverted if you choose so. becoming extroverted or outgoing or approaching somebody at a networking event and, oh my gosh, I'm not wired that way because my parents are like that, is just what you believe. Like, I believe becoming extroverted and socializing for an introvert is you facing your fear in socializing in uncomfortable situations, rolling back to what we spoke about earlier. And so that's just like a little mini example where you like, oh, you can't rise to the level. I think you just haven't practiced your emotions at that level.
You have no idea how hard it was for me to break through that. Growing as an engineer, I have 2 computer science degrees. Just writing software and just leading technical people that were as introverted as I was, but I wasn't really introverted. I was forced to become introverted because of the career that I chose. So when I opened my business and I needed to start networking, it was the most difficult things for me. Like, it was so bad that I will try to make games with one of my employees. We will go to conferences to say, let's see how many business cards we can collect. And that was the only way I could actually go and approach people. And I will freeze to death before I will try to talk to somebody. And it took like 5 years, by the way. It took a long time to break through that. Now
you were an introvert
and it was so smooth, right? But I broke through that fear, right? And I used courage to do it. And now it's natural.
So hold on a second, dig into that, because there's probably people watching that are like, what are you talking about? I'm an introvert. That's it. I'm not wired that way. So wait, there's probably people that are like, wait, David, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And what would you tell them?
Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Feel the fear, do it anyway.
You know, if you want to practice and you don't feel so embarrassed, because the problem with being an introvert is that you are afraid that people may reject you. It's a rejection problem. That's all it is. It's a rejection problem. And it's in your mind. You're thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about the other person. This was the breakthrough. My wife told me, go to all these conferences, you spend all this money, you come back with nothing, because all you're trying to do is connect with people to do business with.
So that you
your own
could
interest.
somehow grow your business, right?
Yeah.
So like there's almost a sort of selfishness.
Yes.
Where that's where the anxiety popped in a little bit, or the shyness, because it was sort of about you. And go ahead.
Rejection, right?
Yes.
She helped me so much. Like, God used her in such a beautiful way. One day she told me, this is 2012. She told me, go to the conference to see how you can help somebody else unconditionally. Go with your knowledge and approach people in a way that you try to get nothing from them. Just see how you can help. And the minute I started doing that, people were more open. They will embrace me. And my fear of being rejected got lower and lower and lower. Of course, out of 20 people that I will try to talk to, I will only talk to 5. I still got rejected. But because it wasn't about me, it was about the person that I was trying to talk to. How can I help? Everything changed. Everything changed.
Right there, folks, is the secret to being likable, the secret to building connections. You know, people. So David, that's amazing, by the way. I believe that's the same reason why that people are passionate at selling, because you're not trying to sell something that's deceiving. You're trying to curiously help that person in sales. If it's the right item for that person, it's not trying to swindle them into making a buy that doesn't make sense. So when people say, hey, I'm not good at sales, it's just not my thing, right? Whatever excuse they're going to say, I believe there's a selfishness where they think they got to take advantage of this person in order to sell something. It's the wrong mindset, just like the wrong mindset for David back in the day, walking into it of how can I leverage this relationship for myself? That's the salesperson that says, I'm going to try to sell this person for myself. The huge shift is, what can I do to pour into this person so that I can help them? And maybe if I help 20 people, a few of them may turn into other things down the road. But when you go in trying to figure things out of and I think that's the huge, that's the secret to networking. Ding, 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 everybody. That is the secret to networking. that nobody understands. Somehow nobody understands that. But I believe that's the secret to relationships across the board. It's the secret to sales. When you can understand that person and say, look, we can really help you, and you honestly get them results, you're doing a disservice not telling them that you can really help them. So I think that's a huge thing, David. Huge.
And you got it right. It's on every relationship. If you go into a marriage and you go with this mentality, how can I be of service? How can I help my partner be better without expecting anything in return? By the way, that's the condition. If you do that, you're going to have a beautiful marriage, because going back to scripture, right? I have in the back of my wall at my office, I'm not at my office right now, but I have this thing that I took from scripture, and it says, what you give, you receive. And remember, this is neutral. This is not saying do good or do bad. No, it's a plain statement. It says, what you give, you receive. So that if you're trying to help unconditionally, if you really care about the other person, what are you going to receive? The same thing. But if you go there with a selfish mindset, even in marriage or in a relationship, what's it when you go with what's in it for me, what you're going to get is the same thing. You're going to get selfishness and you're going to get rejection. This is key for having a beautiful fulfillment and fulfilled life, right? Isn't it?
I believe it's everything. And the law of human connection is people naturally, if you come from an authentic place, and it's hard not to come from an authentic place when you're trying to help somebody. Hey, what's up? Tell me your story. Like, where are you from? What are you working on? What challenges or opportunities are you dealing with in your business? Oh my goodness, I experienced something similar. Here's my recommendation. Or you know what? My guy David, he's a software master. You got to speak to David about this.
Yeah.
And people are like, wow, why is Daniel so willing to help me? Because in the world of give and you receive, people want to reciprocate. It may not be everybody, but if you're helping 100 people, people are going to just say like, David, thank you so much for the help. Can I help you with something?
Yeah.
Right.
Or even consciously, right? You make such a big impact in their life that maybe 6 months from there, somebody speaks about a need that you can fulfill, and they will connect you right away with love.
Yes.
Right. But this is the condition is you cannot have an expectancy. If you have an expectancy, it doesn't work because it becomes selfish again. And then it's even worse because you're manipulating people. Right.
That's right. And that's the shift, folks. That's the shift. It's come from a place of how can I help everybody that I meet, and organically it will come back to you most of the time of like, what can I do for you? Like, how can I serve you in return? Thank you for pouring into me. And the more you can say like, I want to be more wired like that, I feel like I'm lucky to just, I don't know, maybe it's part of like what I learned early on, or maybe my retail experience. They say people in retail are like the soft skills just naturally come from that. And so I worked at Apple and I started to understand people, but starting to decode like why do I enjoy being around people? Why do they enjoy being around me? It's literally that. That's everything. It's not, hey guys, how you doing? Like the way I used to network and the way most people incorrectly network is, how you doing? Oh, good. Here's a business card. How you doing? So yeah, we could build some software for you. You want some software? Great. Yeah. Like, we're at a good price, right? You're not even listening to them. It's about yourself.
Yeah.
So just shift it. And that's where the nerves are gone when it's not about you. Like that's the other part too, where you just.
What do you have to lose if you have nothing to lose? Like,
nerves are gone when you're not being selfish, and that's everything. When you're coming from an authentic place, that's everything.
Daniel, thank you so much for your time, brother. One last question before we finish the podcast. If you had access to a billboard on the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Give without expectation, life gives right back.
That's beautiful. Give without expectation, and life will give right back. That's fantastic. That's awesome.
Cheers,
Daniel,
David.
thank you so much for
Thank
to
you,
be in the
brother.
podcast. If people would like to get in touch with you, maybe hire your services, how can they find you?
Yeah, Daniel Linares, Linares. I'm on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'd love to, I love helping people just like you, as this comes kind of full circle, you'll learn that for some of us, the meaning of life starts to become, how can I help as many people as possible understand that they have the ability to break well beyond where they are. And so, over the next few years, we're continuing to build our event business, but I love these kind of topics around psychology, around self, around the possibility of humans, limitations that are fully imaginary. And DanielLinares.com. And would love to connect with any of you that share a passion of what David and I spoke about here today.
Beautiful. Daniel, thank you so much. Keep making the world a better place, and have a wonderful rest of the week.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.